apologize for the early technical difficulty, and I appreciate all of those who are continuing and joining us on our broadcast. We have the great honor to be broadcasting live from Philadelphia, where we are at the CCAR convention with over 550 rabbis here at the convention with us, many of whom are with us in the room. And I'm glad that all of you who joined us from your home or from your office or en route from all across North America, and several are joining from around the world through our chapters in Arzenu. As you have heard, everyone who is joining us by remote access is now on mute, and you'll be able to submit your questions and comments either through the raise hand icon on the GoToWebinar software, or you'll be able to submit a question through the software. I want to specifically thank Rabbi Steve Fox, Rabbi Brigitte Rosenberg, and Rabbi Dan Medwin and Josh Mason-Barkin for their technical help in making sure that we can broadcast live from the CCAR convention. It's a great honor to be with so many of our colleagues, as so many of us feel very, very close to the election results and are anticipating important analysis. One quick announcement that I encourage everyone to seek further analysis and updates on the elections. One opportunity will be this Friday at noon with the Union for Reform Judaism's webinar, which will feature Tamar Witz of the Brookings Institute, Chemi Shalev from Haaretz, the United States correspondent, and our own Rabbi Yehudit Vorchov, who will be joining us from Israel. That's this Friday at noon, and you can find that through the URJ website or Facebook site. Many of us here went to sleep last night worried and anxious about the results, and awoke here in the United States with the news that the Likud party and Benjamin Netanyahu won a whopping 30 seats in the 20th elections for the Knesset. This is the largest that any party has received in decades, and the front runner, the second runner-up, was of course the Zionist camp, the Machaneh Tzioni, that received 24 seats. We are honored to be joined with Rabbi Gilad Kariv, as we said, the executive director of the IMPJ, and also number 32 on the slate of the Zionist camp. Gilad has not only been a force in building our reform movement in Israel, but has provided us important victories for issues that are close to us, whether it's the conversion bill or the egalitarian section in the Kotel. And I personally go to sleep every night a little bit less worried that I know that Gilad is there on the ground fighting for our rights and building our movement, whether it's in various congregations throughout the Israel movement or in the Knesset. His leadership is one of the most important things that we can see coming from Israel, and I'm glad that he is joining us. Dan, I'm told that we have an echo coming from my end on the other side. If we can, anything we can do about that. Gilad, I want to turn to you, and I want to ask you to take us through your feelings and your experiences as Election Day opened yesterday morning, all the way through the end as the results started to come in.
So first of all, shalom.
Gilad, one second, we're just making sure we can hear you. Don't think we're hearing Gilad.
Josh, can you hear me?
Okay. So Gilad, again, take us through some of your feelings, both as the director of our movement and as a candidate for the Knesset, as the voting opened and the few days and hours leading up to Election Day, and so on and so forth through the day.
So first of all, shalom to you all in Philadelphia and around North America through the webinar, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts and my analysis in regard to the current results. I first need to apologize for not being in Philly. Once the date of the elections was announced, I had to cancel my participation in the CCAR convention. ending with those results, maybe it would have been better for me to be with you. And I also need to apologize for being so exhausted after a very intensive day of elections. And if my level of English is not my regular level, please forgive me. Well, it was a very intensive day. As Josh shared with you, I ran in the primaries of the Labour Party, which is one of the two parties that came together to form the Zionist Union. And although I didn't expect this time to become a Knesset member because of my place in the list, you can understand and imagine that this was for me personally a disappointing day or disappointing morning. We started the election day with many hopes that the Zionist Union will be able, in the end of the campaign, to form a government and to suggest a new path for Israeli politics. When the polls, the first polls, were released yesterday evening, we learned that we're talking about a political equality or an equality between the two leading parties, the Zionist Union and the Likud. It was a disappointment, but we had some hope that we might be able to form a government, or at least we are heading towards a unity government. But this morning, as most of you probably know, we learned that the real outcome of the elections is that the Israeli public sent us to survey from the opposition and gave Benjamin Netanyahu a renewed mandate to lead the government. It is important for me to say in the beginning of our conversation that the IMPJ, as the Israel Movement for Reform and Progressive Judaism, does not hold a partisan position. And I'm glad to say that according to our studies and surveys that were done by think tanks like the Israel Democracy Institute, among those Israelis that identify themselves, religiously speaking, with Reform Judaism, we see a lot of Israelis that identify themselves as people that are holding central political views and even right-wing political views. And while my board encouraged me to take this political journey, and while our philosophy as a movement is to encourage our lay leaders and our rabbis and our activists to be involved in public life and political life in Israel, as a movement, we are not holding a partisan position. You want me to continue? Josh, I can't hear you, but just signal if you want me to continue.
Help us understand a little bit how these elections not only influence what some of the major issues are, whether it's the political situation or the security issues vis-a-vis the Palestinian state, especially in regards to the remarks that Netanyahu made publicly, both in terms of Israeli citizens who are coming to vote from the Arab sector, as well as his call against the possibility of a Palestinian state.
Okay, look, as you all know, we are heading Pesach and Leil Seder. And one of the fundamental guidelines of the Agadah, as stated in the Talmud, is להתחיל בגנות ולסיים בשבח. To start with the bad parts of the story, but to make sure you end the story with a happy ending or with good news. And I would like to take this opportunity to change a little bit the Talmudic formula and to start with the good news, then to move to the challenging parts of the story, and to go back to some positive elements. And I want to start by saying that the day of elections in Israel was a big and successful democratic celebration. And although I personally belong to those that feel deep disappointment, and although I'm sure that there are many troubled colleagues in the CCR convention and in the webinar, also because of those issues that are close to our heart, we do need to remind ourselves, and in the end to remind it to our congregants and to our colleagues, that the Israeli democracy showed once again its strength and its ability to play an important role in the daily life of Israeli citizens. In the end, the level of voting, the level of participation in the elections exceeded the expectations. This is a good sign to the strength of the democratic mechanism in Israel, and we need to celebrate the fact that the Israeli society is a mature democracy without undermining the challenges. Now, here I do want to refer to some of the troubling outcomes of the elections before I go back to some positive outcomes. Look, it is not a secret that many of us in the progressive community feel that the Israeli right-wing parties, led by the Likud, are not committed enough to some of the values that we cherish. And the most important one in our case is the concept and the idea of religious pluralism. We are going to end the coalition negotiation probably with the government based on the right-wing parties and the ultra-Orthodox parties, after we enjoyed 2 years of not having the ultra-Orthodox parties as part of the coalition. And definitely when it comes to issues of religion and state, we cannot expect any major breakthrough in the coming few years, not in the area of freedom of marriage and divorce, not in the area of conversion, not in the area of formal recognition in the non-Orthodox denominations. We do hope, and I must say that I do believe, that under the leadership of Prime Minister Netanyahu, we will be able to sustain the current status quo, and that we're not going to witness new attempts to block the work of the non-Orthodox denominations or to present new religious legislation in Israel. We saw that Prime Minister Netanyahu identifies the red lines of world Jewry, for example, in the area of conversion, also in the area of the Western Wall platforms and regulations, and we believe that the status quo over religion and state will be preserved. We have a deep concern, and it is connected to the campaign when it comes to the relations between the Jewish majority and the Arab minority. We need to remember that this campaign is not the first opportunity in which right-wing leaders, right-wing parties used the growing tension between Jews and non-Jews in sovereign Israel as a political platform. Indeed, the Prime Minister, during the day of elections, took a decision that I think is not only the wrong decision, but it is also a dangerous decision to the democratic well-being of Israel. He took a decision to use the fear from the Arab vote as the way to leverage the political outcome for his party. This fear from the United Arab Party, this fear from the growing level of participation of the Arab citizens in the elections was a key element in the Likud campaign in the last few days and during the day of election. And this is definitely a troubling sign. And I will carefully say that while we don't expect any huge breakthroughs in the area of religion and state, and at the same time we think that the status quo will be preserved and no new legislation will be presented, we have a serious reason to be worried in this area of the relations between Jews and Arabs inside Israel. And I think that one of the main challenges of Prime Minister Netanyahu, and one of the things that we need as progressive Jews in Israel and overseas to present to the Israeli public, is this demand that the Prime Minister will take with his new government the necessary steps in order to lower the tension between those two communities in Israel. The last point I want to make is that before I move to the balancing points, the other troubling issue is the demand among some of the right-wing parties and political figures to change some of the fundamental constitutional mechanisms in the Israeli democracy, mainly when it comes to the authorities of the Israeli Supreme Court. And here I think, again, that we will have to work very hard from the opposition in Israel with those coalition members that are committed to the constitutional character of the State of Israel, and with the world jury to block those initiatives that are trying to reset the balance between the different branches of government in Israel. So those are a few major concerns. You let me know, Josh, if I can continue with some of the positive outcomes. Josh, again, I lost you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Gilad, and I appreciate for both giving us analysis on both sides of the coin, as we may see it, trying to find some of that silver lining. Tell us, for a minute, go a bit further into detail, as we say, from the cloud to the prat, from the general speaking into the more specific, a little bit about what the coalition may look like and what may happen within your own party, within the Zionist camp. We know that there are 45 days now to make up a coalition, as no one party received a majority, rather a plurality. It is likely that the President of Israel will turn to Prime Minister Netanyahu once again to form a coalition. What do we see in that? Any possible surprises? And within your own party, do you think that Yitzhak Herzog and Tzipi Livni will remain close partners now as they enter the Knesset in the opposition?
So right now, the reasonable outcome or the reasonable political landscape is the one that brings together the right-wing parties, Likud and the
they may be
Jewish
hearing
House.
us at home, but not in the room. Gilad, hold on 1 second, please.
Okay.
I just want to remind everyone that this session is being recorded. For those who couldn't be here or those at home would like to listen later without the commercial breaks. Okay. Gilad, I think we can hear you now.
Yeah. You can hear me? Josh? Josh? Josh?
Okay.
To continue?
Gilad, I think we can hear you now.
You can hear me, Josh? Josh? Good. So, following Josh, Rabbi Weinberg's last question, the most reasonable political landscape that will develop in the coming few weeks is a government based on the right-wing parties, namely the Likud and Habayit HaYehudi, the modern Orthodox party, with the two ultra-Orthodox parties, the Sephardic and the Ashkenazi, and with the new party headed by Moshe Kahlon, a former Likud minister that left the Likud and formed a new party, which is a central party identified with social issues, with welfare issues, but a party that brings together people from the moderate right and moderate left. This will be probably the next government of Israel based on a small majority of few Knesset members, 65 out of 120. The model of a unity government right now is less relevant. It looks like the Zionist Union, together with Meretz, Yair Lapid's party, Yesh Atid, and the Arab new party, the Arab bloc, the united list of the Arab parties, will be the opposition. It will be a strong and wide opposition of 55 Knesset members. This is definitely a serious opposition. I just joined the broadcast after I finished a meeting with my colleagues in the Labour faction, and it looks like the Labour Party, the Zionist camp, a union headed by Yitzhak Herzog and Tzipi Livni, see their near future in the opposition, serving the Israeli public from the seats of the opposition. I do think that in the future, if Prime Minister Netanyahu decides to do a courageous step vis-a-vis the Palestinians, then we might see a change in the structure of the coming government. I must say that as a member of the Zionist Union, I belong to those that believe that a strong and vibrant democracy needs a coalition, but also a strong opposition, and I'm glad that the new Knesset members representing the Zionist Union understand their role as future opposition members. Now I can't hear you, but just signal to me if you can hear me.
What I want to do now, Gilad, if you will, I'd like to open it up to questions from the crowd, both from our listeners out in cyberspace and our colleagues here in the room. So I want to ask if anyone here has a question that they'd like to ask, and we'll take some coming in from the crowd, and then for a few minutes, and then I want to ask us to sum up and leave us with our message as we both go forward into Shabbat and further on into Pesach. Any questions here from the crowd? Okay. We're going to take it live. And we're going to ask Rabbi Andy Dubin from Manhattan.
Yes. Hello, Gilad, thank you. Can you talk some about how the incoming Knesset might be reacting or behaving with the rest of the world?
Well, look, it is not a secret that during the campaign and around Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech in the American Congress, the issue of the relations between Jerusalem and DC became to be a major issue. And many of us in Israel, in my political camp, but I think that also in other political circles, are disturbed and troubled by what we see in this arena of the foreign relations of the State of Israel, especially when it comes to the relations with the US administration. I think that the fact, and here I'm addressing one of the, I don't want to say positive outcomes, but balancing points in regard to the election results, I think that we need to identify the fact that the force inside its future coalition as a positive development. You need to remember that in the last government, the Likud had 19 seats, and the party of the foreign minister Avigdor Lieberman had 12 seats, and Habayit HaYehudi headed by Naftali Bennett had 12 seats. And now we see a new setting between the leading party, the Likud, and what we call the right-wing satellite parties. And this is a positive development because I think it will allow the Prime Minister to work in a mode that will release him from some of the political pressure of the more right-wing forces. Now, I do hope, and this is something that we can only hope for, I do hope that after using this tension with the American administration in order to leverage the political campaign of the Likud, I do hope that Prime Minister Netanyahu will work in order to lower the flames. I think that the same way we saw his political stance in regard to the conversion law, I think that also in the past we saw Prime Minister Netanyahu identifies the red lines in the relations between Israel and the US. Now I cannot give you an insurance policy for that, but I do hope that after we finish the campaign, we will see a more responsible and more balanced foreign policy led by the coming Israeli government. We can only hope that this will be the case.
Thank you, Gilad. We'll take one more from here, and then we'll begin to follow up. Yeah.
Thank you, Gilad. I'm Mark Gruber from Rockville Center, New York, and I'm very troubled that I see this as a burgeoning moment of racism in Israel, and the combination of the combined Arab list, which perhaps was a response to that, and then Netanyahu's reaction to that right before the election, and then garnering more votes than were expected. Could you comment on this tragic moment?
Look, as I said in my opening statements, if I need to touch one troubling outcome of these elections is the impact over the relations between Jews and Arabs inside sovereign Israel, and that's definitely a troubling development. Unfortunately, in the political leadership of the two communities, the Jewish majority community in Israel, but also the political leadership of the Palestinian community inside sovereign Israel. The two political leaderships are not doing or not using their political influence in order to promote the values of shared society. I do think that as a member of the majority community, we carry a higher level of responsibility. And the things that you are allowed to do as the leaders of a minority, you can't do when you're leading the majority and you're holding the political powers. I think that the progressive forces inside Israel, and it's important to say that some of them are represented in the Likud list. They are definitely represented in the central parties, including this party the new party that will join the government. It is well reflected in the work of our new president, Mr. Reuven Rivlin. I think that the progressive forces in the Israeli society, from the left side of the political map, from the central parties, but also from the moderated right, we will have to invest a lot of public, ideological, and political energy in order to block this momentum, this bad momentum in the area of Jewish-Arab relations in Israel. I fully agree with you that the comments presented by Prime Minister Netanyahu on the election days were a peak of a very ugly and dangerous process that we see inside the Israeli political system. And again, I hope that it was only a political move for gaining success, unfortunately, on the election day, and that Prime Minister Netanyahu understands its duty right now to choose the other path. I think that the President of Israel will be a very forceful player in this arena, and I think that the diaspora jury can play a positive and important role in this arena, the same way we all played a very important and powerful role in the arena of the conversion legislation, the Western Wall, and other issues of religion and state.
In online also have to deal with that some of that frustration that many of us feel as we're constantly checking the news and looking at updates, but feeling very far away from a way to impact. So how important is that diaspora voice? How important is that we are loud and vociferous in our feelings and our connection with Israel? And what can we do from abroad right now, specifically from the United States, to help raise our voice and to help influence what's happening in Israel, especially surrounding the issues that we hold so dear?
Josh, you can hear me? Okay. Look, friends, I ask for your permission to present a request to all of you. And before I'm using this opportunity to talk with you about the WZO elections, about your involvement in public affairs in Israel and the Jewish world, I do want to ask all of you, the same way I'm doing it with my Israeli rabbis, to use the pulpit this coming Shabbat in order to remind ourselves that this is also a moment that captures the strength of the Israeli democracy. Today I placed a post on my Hebrew Facebook page, and I quoted the Talmudic demand, חייב אדם לברך על הרעה כשם שהוא מברך על הטובה. That the person must say or recite a blessing not only for the good moments in his life, but also for the challenging and even rough moments of its life. And I know that many of you, as progressive Jews, as progressive leaders, feel anxious and worried and maybe sad when you see the outcomes of this electoral campaign. But we need to follow this Talmudic concept of levarech al hara'ah, and to remind our people in the synagogues and in the study groups that the people of Israel implemented their democratic right and did it in a very serious and devoted way. And we need to tell ourselves that 2 years from now, 3 years from now, or 4 years from now, we will go once again to the polls, and we will have another opportunity to shift the Israeli political system. It is a very important message to convey, especially in progressive and liberal circles. Now, in regard to Rabbi Weinberg's question, look, we need to be careful with asking diaspora Jews to be politically involved in the Israeli scene. Yet, while we are careful Zionist enterprise, and part of the legitimacy of defining the state of Israel as a Jewish state is to give diaspora Jewry a place, an important place in the Israeli discourse. And here I think that there are issues in which diaspora Jewry and the progressive forces and the reform movement should play a role. It has to do, of course, with religion and state issues and the status of our movement, but it also has to do with issues of majority and minority relations. It has to do also with issues of human rights in Israel. I think that diaspora Jewry can play a very important role in helping us to secure the democratic character of the state of Israel, and I'm telling you that Prime Minister Netanyahu is listening to what North American Jewry has to say, and this is the role of the leadership of the Union for Reform Judaism, the CCAR, and the HUC. One of the most important ways to impact the discourse in Israel is to use the coming opportunity of the WZO elections. I know it's difficult to explain to ourselves and definitely to our congregants how come 120 years after the first Zionist Congress and almost 70 years after we established the State of Israel, we still need those national institutions. But believe me, we need them in order to promote step-by-step religious pluralism in Israel, enabling us to do the holy work on your behalf and on our behalf on the ground in Israel, and also to enable you to have a powerful political public voice in Israel. And I think that the troubling results of those elections might create an opportunity for all of us to stand in front of our congregants, to leave aside for a moment the issue with the Palestinians, but to say to our people that right now the more progressive forces in Israeli Jewry are not going to form the coalition. It's the more conservative, nationalist, even ultra-nationalist forces that are going to gain the power. But we have the opportunity in the next 45 days, the same period of time that Benjamin Netanyahu will get in order to form his government. We have 45 days to ensure that when it comes to the round table of the Jewish world, not only what is happening in Israel, and I beg you to remember that the national institutions are the only democratic round table of the Jewish people, that we have a real opportunity to remind Israelis, to remind Israeli politicians that in the end there is a progressive majority in the Jewish world. And it's not an easy thing to convince a congregant to vote to the Zionist Congress, but this is a holy task. And there are many ways you can impact the Israeli discourse and the Jewish discourse in North America. In the coming 45 days, the most influential, powerful, and easy to get way is to help ARZA to win the elections to the World Zionist Congress. And I really ask all of you to be personally committed to this task. I'm offering my time. If you need me to go online and to talk with your board in the next board meeting, if you want us to do webinars with your congregants, me, myself, Anat Hoffman, any of our Israeli rabbis, please feel free through Rabbi Weinberg and ARZA team. Please feel free to use our time and energy in order to help all of us to win this campaign. Please encourage your people to vote, to remember that Israel in the end
You can okay, unmute. I want to thank Gilad Kariv for his message and his teaching. And it's my great hope that that teaching, that Torah that we come, that and bring them to our congregations and to our friends and to our families and all of our networks, and to say that you do have an important role to play here, that your voice does matter, and we want to get everyone here together to galvanize our movement so that we make a large showing. Someone asked how the elections for the World Zionist Congress are altered by the Israeli elections. Well, the Labor Party won a lot more than they did in the previous elections, which has a proportional relationship to seats at the World Zionist Organization and the World Zionist Congress. I'll explain more about that later this evening for those of us in the room here at the CCAR convention. But there is a silver lining there, and it is an important step. And what we need now is to take exactly what Gilad said, those 45 days, and make sure that every single person exercises their democratic responsibility as members of the Jewish people to stand up and be counted. With that, I know that Gilad sent important messages, that we all take those messages with us. Those of us here in the room, there are several dozen rabbis here in the room today. For those of you who are listening from cyberspace, and to all those who are listening at home, I want to say Toda Rabbah. I want to thank Gilad very, very much for taking the time. It's the evening there. And I want to thank all of us for taking time out of their busy schedules and their afternoons. And as we get ready for Shabbat, that we take the message and spread it as far and as wide as possible. And with that,
friends, we look forward to see you all in Jerusalem in the next CCR convention.